Hello, this video contains spoilers for the Mortal Kombat franchise as a whole, especially Mortal Kombat 1. They just released some new footage of the introduction to it. So if you don't want any spoilers for the new game, probably don't watch this video. Also, it goes without saying there's some strong violence and language in this. So if you don't like any of that, I'm not sure why you clicked the Mortal Kombat video in the first place. Anyways, if you're good with that, here's the video. Please enjoy.
Let's dance. Sorry.
Howdy, folks. I'm Meet the Name, and today I'd like to talk about something very exciting. That's right, lore for a fighting game. That's cool, isn't it? Please, I need someone to agree with me. Well, since you clicked, that must mean you're interested. At least a little bit, so allow me to talk about how excited / scared I am for the lore and the story of the next Mortal Kombat game. For people who don't know, or probably don't care, a new Mortal Kombat game is releasing September 19th. And as the name suggests, this game is kind of a weird soft reboot sort of thing, meaning that while the events of the previous game did happen, and will be addressed, the majority of the game's cast and the world has been reset. So what do I mean by reset? Well, to make it short, at the end of Mortal Kombat 11, Liu Kang, a Shaolin monk, managed to defeat a being known as Kronika, who controlled the concept of time itself. Also, Liu Kang became a god shortly before he did that because Raiden, the god of thunder, gave him this god power stuff. So superpowered god Liu Kang gained control of time, so he's basically god now, until the Aftermath DLC, in which Shang Tsung, an evil wizard dude, tried to take control for himself. From what I can tell, it seems like the story is still very much following the Liu Kang as Ultra God timeline as opposed to the Shang Tsung's Wild Ride timeline. Oh yeah, and the reason why Liu Kang fought Kronika was because she was trying to get her ideal timeline perfect, so like she's been pulling the strings all along throughout all the previous games, which means the other previous timeline rewrite in Mortal Kombat 9 was probably part of her plan too. Oh yeah, Mortal Kombat 9 was also a timeline reset, but not a complete reset. It just went back to the events of the first Mortal Kombat game through to the third, with some story beats drastically altered towards the end, which should not be confused with Mortal Kombat 1. And obviously the timeline reset happened due to the events of Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which had every playable character ever beating the shit out of one another. And that happened because of so-and-so, and I guess that all doesn't really matter anymore. I think. But then some 3D era characters are in the new game too. So where the hell does Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe fit in then? Is it canon? Is Dark Khan ever coming back? Where the hell is Mocap? I'm getting sidetracked. Anyways, Liu Kang is God now. He decided to make a new timeline full of peace and prosperity. The problem is, if you want a story mode for your game about people eviscerating each other, you kinda gotta throw away all that stuff. So far, as of recording, 17 minutes of new footage from the story has been revealed, showcasing that the dastardly old Shang Tsung is doing his evil wizard stuff yet again, who is also free if you pre-order, because don't think just pre-order and hope the game good. With the help of Kronika, who is somehow still alive. I mean, it's Mortal Kombat. No one ever stays dead, besides King Jared. Besides that bit of story info, I can also tell you that some familiar Mortal Kombat characters have also received new backgrounds and motivations. Now, for folks who aren't familiar with the franchise, you'll know that Mortal Kombat has some pretty neat little goofy goobers in it. To start, we got an angry Revenant who wants to avenge his dead family who was murdered by Sub-Zero, but plot twist, it wasn't really Sub-Zero, it was the evil sorcerer Quan Chi who did it.
Put up more of a fight than your wife did.
And guess who's in the season pass? We got the spirit of the dude who Scorpion killed that came back as a shadow dude with his own stand. He's not in Mortal Kombat 1, I'm sorry. We got forever alone lizard man who just wants to get his riz on, but constantly gets his ass kicked instead. He gets to be handsome now, depending on the form you prefer. We got an Australian guy who loves being evil. He's the best character in the latest live-action film also. And also the first one. He's just great in general. Also seems like he's a cameo fighter, so you won't get to roast any shrimp on Barbies with him. Oh, almost forgot the twin princesses. Or in the old timeline, one was like a weird BDSM clone with bad dental hygiene. They're still working on her many trust issues, and she's also not a very good kisser either. Oh, there's also the Hat Man. He throws a hat, and he gets his neck broken sometimes. He's in the game at least. Sharp Arms is also here. He gets his ass kicked a lot too. They tried to make him kinda sympathetic in MK11, except his race has a small habit of eating people, and like, leaving their flayed corpses around like cattle in a slaughterhouse. We're supposed to feel bad for them, I think. Personally, I'm kinda with this guy named Kodal on just wiping them out. Oh yeah, Kodal! Dude took the place of a dude named Shao Kahn for like 2 games and ruled a place called Outworld.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
Then he got his ass beat repeatedly by like a group of toddlers, and then Shao Kahn showed up from the past and whooped his ass some more. Then his back got broke. Then there was like some more time travel stuff, and then he got his head cut off. He was cool, but then he was lame. Then he died. Sad is the tale of Kodal Khan. I'm assuming he received so many L's that Liu Kang kinda just wiped him from the timeline as a mercy. And that's just a small selection of crazy characters. As you can tell, with a fighting game story, you usually gotta face one person at a time in fights that ordinarily wouldn't happen if characters had any sort of social awareness or learned risk management skills, which can lead to problems like with the aforementioned Kodal Khan. How does a character that's supposed to be the ruler of an entire realm get constantly stomped on so easily? Because gameplay needs to happen. There's such an interesting discrepancy between game lore and gameplay that you kinda have to turn a blind eye towards it, but it also gets kinda difficult because the game wants you to take these characters seriously in the story. In Mortal Kombat 9, this didn't feel as annoying because of the whole tournament aspect. Believe it or not, there hasn't really been a big tournament in these games since 9. There, it makes sense for everyone to get their butts whooped because while most of the cast had powers, they still felt very vulnerable because they were presented as just people. And folks like Shang Tsung, Sindel, Goro, and Shao Kahn faced real consequences when they lost in that game, since they were treated more like boss characters. Also, Sindel has like one of the biggest kill counts in the franchise. MK9 was a straight up massacre with her. But in NKX and MK11, we have realm rulers and gods getting easily dispatched every 3 fights, because the game needs you to fight and we already use Baraka too much for this chapter. Of course, there were attempts in these games to remedy this. There are a few fights that are against exclusive NPC opponents who aren't part of the roster. It was an attempt to add in some variety to the story without using more resources to create fully fledged characters. Obviously, folks weren't too happy about that. Balancing gameplay with story is difficult. Mortal Kombat is very much the video game equivalent of smashing all your action figures together and making up the rules as you go along. It's interesting to see these newer games take these originally simple, silly concepts and try to turn them into something grander. It's kind of like watching as superheroes and villains in media have progressed as well. Spider-Man was just a dude bitten by a radioactive spider originally. Now there's like multiple clones of him. He regularly deals with Satan, his semen is radioactive too, and it gives people cancer. Also, the Joker turned from some silly clown into one of the biggest names in fictional villain history. He's also an inspiration for sad, lonely, extremely volatile young men everywhere. If you're one of those people, please seek help.
Crazy hamburger! This is horrible! Crazy hamburger!
What's really funny is that Mortal Kombat's insane world and characters can work well. There were a couple of comics released before Mortal Kombat X came out that had some pretty good writing. It brought back characters and concepts that hadn't been seen in a while, and made good use of them within the context of its story. Shame that the actual story for the game just wasn't all that great. MK11 then tried to do something interesting by having past versions of characters meet with their present selves in the game. That was kinda cool because the past interpretations were pretty different from how they were in the present, except for Kano. The current Scorpion of that time had resolved the conflict with the brother of the man that had killed his family, although again, the Bald Sorcerer was actually the one that did it. Suddenly, the past Scorpion shows up and has no idea why his current self would ever work with that guy. Then you got Johnny Cage, who has one of the best stories out of anyone in the most recent games. Dude started off as this Hollywood jerkwad who was obsessed with his celebrity status. He was self-centered and kind of a sexist prick. As the story went on and as he fought more of his allies, he began to grow. Was he still a bit cocky? Sure. But in MKX, he has a family now. He helps train new soldiers to defend Earth. He's a bona fide defender of good who is so far removed from what he once was. And then we get to further explore this arc in MK11, where he meets himself from the past. He comes face to face with what he once was, and in the process he shows his younger self what responsibility means. I think it was kind of beautiful. This personal introspection and the willingness to make sure that he continues to carry on what he has learned to a version of himself that he frankly can't stand. With MK1, the slate is mostly wiped clean for that story. Part of me is fine with that because for Johnny Cage it felt that his story was basically complete. But what about the others? Well, frankly, most folks in the other games weren't given nearly that much to work with besides maybe Scorpion and Sub-Zero with the whole burying the past rival thing. With MK1, I've seen these lore drops for recently announced characters that were shown on Twitter, and no, I'm not calling it X, and they seem just so fascinating to me. Let's take a look at my two favorite examples, Baraka and Reptile. Both of these characters, as I have mentioned, have a history of just getting beaten up all the time. Neither one received much screen time or attention, unless it was to, again, get absolutely obliterated. In the new timeline, they seem to have more depth, and possibly more story prominence. Reptile is no longer one of the last of his kind. He is now ostracized for his ability to turn into a human form whenever he wants, making him a freak. It's an interesting change of pace for the character, as before he fought for Shao Kahn with the promise that he would be rewarded with having his race back. Now we see an outsider, someone who wants to carve his own destiny in a world that is hostile to his very existence. From the trailers, it seems like he's hanging out with the good guys now, so that makes me pretty happy. Up next, Baraka, my beloved, has an entirely new motivation. In the old timelines, he was just a very prominent mook whose entire race, the Tarkatans, were loyal to Shao Kahn. And when Shao died, Kotal Khan wanted all Tarkatans exterminated. Didn't help that they tried to get Melina onto the throne. In MK11, they very much tried to play up a more sympathetic angle with the whole wiping out an entire race thing. And I can understand that. Genocide of an entire race is pretty messed up. But as I mentioned before, Tarkatans eat people, like straight up slaughtering them, with rampaging warbands that scoop you up and rip you apart. The dude ate brains. I don't think that's something a particularly sympathetic character does. In the new timeline Liu Kang has developed, I guess he wasn't much of a fan of the Tarkatans either, so he sort of just wiped them away. Poof! The entire race is gone. That whole era of peace and prosperity thing is actually looking pretty groovy. In their place, we now get the Tarkat Plague. Rather than being born a horrible, cannibalistic monster, you get infected into being one. And believe it or not, this adds more to Baraka. His new lore turns him into a bit of a hero type. People afflicted with this plague have been rounded up and placed into camps where they suffer and slowly die. Baraka still seems to hold on to who he is, fighting the madness and mutations that are afflicting him. He fights for those who cannot fight for themselves. From the trailer so far, he seems to have been elevated to the status of guy who may or may not get his ass beat as much alongside Reptile. It's really interesting to see how a game keeps general aspects of these characters who have been around for 30 years and changes up their motivations so much. I think that's one of the big strengths of Mortal Kombat as a franchise. You can change the setting as much as you want, but these character archetypes still remain so consistently memorable that even motivations change, you can still see them in there. There's also entirely new dynamics that have been added to existing relationships as well. Remember Sub-Zero? There's like two technically in the old timelines. One was an older brother, Bi-Han, who's a bit of a dick. The other was a younger guy, Kuai Liang, who's actually pretty nice. In this new timeline, Bi-Han is still Sub-Zero, and Kuai Liang is now Scorpion. You know, the title that belonged to the guy that originally killed Sub-Zero for the whole family being murdered, but it was actually tricked by a bald evil sorcerer thing. In MKX and MK11, the younger Sub-Zero and Scorpion had resolved their beef with one another, and fought together. That trend still continues in this new timeline, except, you know, now they're related. They also got an adopted brother, whose parents, their dad, accidentally murdered. Kinda awkward. And what's interesting is, Bi-Han is still very much a foil in this timeline. He's been hinted to desire more, in that he might very well be able to do drastic things in order to get more power. In the main story, I'm curious to see what's going to happen between him and Kuai Liang, and Scrappy-Doo, I mean Smoke. There's an interesting family drama that could generate some really fun conflict, which in turn makes for fights that make sense without the commonplace, I bumped into your shoulder, now I'm gonna kill you, format that's usually present in these story modes. In a way, there's a lot more moral ambiguity, or at least more justifications for actions. For example, Tarkot plague victims are being sent to camps by a royal family to stop a plague from spreading. I kinda get that, still cruel though. We also see that Melina, one of the princesses, is affected by the plague herself. We can see that since her mother and sister are also in the game, that there's probably going to be some additional conflict here too. And Melina is next in line for the throne, but having the plague puts her rule into question. Her sister is starting to seem more like a potential rival to her, and she needs to find a cure. This brings story conflict towards Baraka's neck of the woods. If a bunch of royal folks want a cure, what's going to stop them from committing a few rights violations or atrocities along the way in order to get it? And this isn't even touching on the main conflict, which is going to be about goofy old Shang Tsung getting everybody into a pickle with the help of Kronika, the living pocket watch. There's apparently another tournament in this game too, so more logical reasons for folks to fight. That makes me happy as well. And that isn't even getting into the whole Sido deal with a class struggle between order-obsessed fascists and a lower caste that wishes to tear it all down for an anarchist utopia.
Take your chaos elsewhere.
There's a lot going on. Also, there's going to be some buddy cop duo stuff with Johnny Cage and a blind warrior. I don't even know where to start with that. Overall, when compared with the past games, I feel like Mortal Kombat 1 has a lot more going for it in the story department. It's trying to do more with a slate that's basically wiped clean, yet it still retains some aspects of the world that it once was. It's highly ambitious in my opinion, and I really hope that it does work out, because these new motivations are really fascinating to me. To see characters who are once villains become something more, to see conflicts arise that are due to stronger interpersonal connections as opposed to just being typical old good and evil. Mortal Kombat 1 has so much potential, and I'm hoping that the story mode does its service. A problem with fighting game stories is that sometimes you just can't work everyone to the story effectively. If that happens, I kinda hope that they just do what Guilty Gear Strive did, and just not include some folks in the story mode unless they are needed. It's better to put in characters that actually have relevance than to just have them be there and do nothing / get their back broken for some reason. This also kind of leads me to one final point. I wish they did more with these video games besides just making them fighting games. I know that sounds like blasphemy to some, but hear me out. The universe of these games is rich with so many different people and places. The game Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks was a testament to the fact that the format can work with a beat 'em up. Why not an RPG format? You got folks of all sorts of weird abilities. You tell me that wouldn't be neat? Hell, give me a virtual novel spin-off and call it Johnny Cage's Love Quest. I'd buy that and also hide it in my Steam library. Oh, and you know what? How about we get a freaking FPS starring everyone's favorite cowboy ninja, Aaron Black? I just want anything that can allow me to get to know these characters more. Street Fighter VI has an amazing single-player mode that lets the player interact more with the characters and allows them to explore the world. The past few Mortal Kombat games, the crypt area has not been as exciting, even though in MK11 it really did try to do more with lore. My only hope is that the invasion mode, with its weird board game feel, can still provide some interesting depth for players to explore. And despite all of my excitement and hopes, I'm probably just going to wait till the game is on sale with all the DLC later on down the line. As cool as Mortal Kombat is, I have a few gripes. Number 1, I suck at fighting games. My aging brain can barely keep up with all them newfangled combos and techniques. Number 2 is the cost.
We've got to have money.
I'm not sorry to say this. Paying $70 for just a standard edition of a game is way too much. I don't care how graphically fancy it is or whatever, I just can't afford that. Remember the freaking pre-order chart? You want the premium edition? Cough up $110, bub. And number 3, there's a chance the story could suck. I'll be honest, that won't be the end of the world because you should primarily get a game because it's fun. But story is part of the fun for me. And if the experience just isn't grabbing me, then I'm not sure I would enjoy the gameplay that much. I've always been primarily a single player kind of guy. I have no desire for brackets or competitive multiplayer modes. I want to get immersed. I want to know the dude I'm playing as. I want to hang out with Baraka and go fishing sometime. I know I'm placing a lot of hopes on this game, but I'm optimistic about it at least a little bit. I mean, at the very least, I can just watch the story on YouTube when it comes out and save myself some cash. Hopefully, now that I've made this video, the intrusive thoughts in my head will stop telling me to talk about Mortal Kombat for at least a little while. But man, can we talk about how cool Baraka is? Thank you all so much for watching this video. This was a lot more rambly than some folks are probably expecting, but I feel that the best way to talk about Mortal Kombat is like at a million miles per hour without any breaks. Feel free to let me know what you think. I'm still experimenting a bit with the format of this channel. I'm not sure what the identity of it should be. So far it's kind of just make a video reviewing / talking about whatever I've seen / think is interesting this week, which is okay with me, but I want to know what y'all think. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
This week on Cooking with Scorpion, learn about chopping, tenderizing, chopping, cake decorating, and chopping.